What's going on YouTube? West Hobbies RC. So we are back with the OMP Hobby M2. We are going to be replacing the feathering shaft, the blade grips, as well as the bottom part of the swashplate, the plastic outer ring. So again, in the last M2 repair video, we did the main shaft. Really nice, really thought out helicopter to work on. So we are going to go ahead and get the head rebuilt. Give you guys a video if you don't know how or looking at how to replace the feathering shaft. Again, this was my first crash, so I have never taken this helicopter apart. But I went ahead, I got brand new head dampeners, as I have 223 flights on this model. Brand new feathering shaft that came with the helicopter. We got ourselves a brand new set of Explorer plastic blade grips. And of course, we got a brand new bottom plate of the swashplate. So, real quick, I went back with the plastic. I know on a post that I made, a lot of people said I should go with metal and the plastic is crap and it breaks and blah, blah, blah. This failure, if you can tell, was at the blade grip bolt. So, let me get this to focus in. You can tell that the failure was at the bolt. Now, before this flight, I ended up tightening the blades up a little bit. For whatever reason, I figured I'll tighten them up and see if I can get some of this looseness out. So, if you look at this blade grip, you can see a stress crack. And if you know anything about plastic, it turns white when it's about to break. Now, you can also see a crack here. Now this crack, of course, probably came from when it spit this blade. The helicopter violently vibrated and exploded in air. But I'm going to blame this failure on me tightening this blade grip up too much, because you can tell it broke right at the blade grip bolt, and it was that flight. I tightened it, went out the fly, and it came apart. So I'm not going to say this was a blade grip failure. I'm sure that blade grips have failed, but make sure you double check that you do not over tighten your blade grips. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and pull this other blade off. Again, 1.5 millimeter Allen wrench. OMP that's really nice that they're keeping everything as a 1.5. So you don't need a million and one different tools. So of course we have the blade with the blade spacers, and we have our little nut here, which we just pop out. So our blades are still in perfect shape. This one has a tiny ding in it, but it's still a good blade. So we'll keep these, set them aside. All right, so now I did order new arms, but these are not damaged whatsoever. So I'm just gonna reuse these arms. So the first thing we're gonna do, we'll pull the arms off. Again, 1.5. They just thread into plastic. So we're gonna go ahead and just set this arm aside. Take this one off. Go ahead and set this arm aside. And then we will grab our other 1.5. So we'll just set the arm and the screw aside. If you guys have problems remembering where things go, you can make little piles. As you can see here, we have our Jesus bolt for the head. We have our blade grip bolts. And we have our arms. I pretty much know where everything goes just by looking at, so I don't really ever do that. But okay, anyways. So we know that this feathering shaft is bent, even if it's not bent, which it has a slight bend to it. It took a really hard impact. So we're gonna grab a 1.5 for one side and a 1.5 for the other. And of course, we are going to hold this and this, and then just twist. Now that came apart really, really easily. Don't know if I like that. Let's pull this screw out and see what it looks like. Now on this screw, does not look. Let me see if I can get this screw to focus. Come on, focus. Screw does not look like it has any Loctite. That might be why it came apart so easy. It does not want to focus. Anyways, no Loctite on that screw. So we're going to go ahead and put our screw in a little pile. Okay, and then we will go ahead and pull this apart. Now, remember how this goes together. So first thing we have is a little copper washer. Okay, so we're going to line this up in a row. And then we have a bearing. Don't drop it like I almost did. And then we have this little spacer that goes in between the two bearings. So we're going to line this all up in a line so we can keep track. And we're going to take our driver, we're going to pop the other bearing out. See if we have anything else in here. Which I do not believe we do. Oh, yeah, we do. Of course. So, now this is important. Focus in here. We have... Okay, so we have our thrust bearings. So you're going to have an outside race, a bearing, an inside race, and then your other bearing. So when we pull these apart, we are going to drop them out as a stack, just like that. Now that we have them out as a stack, we have our bearing, again in a line, and then we have a shim. So we're going to put our shim here. And then we have our inside race. There's going to be this guy right here. And there does not say inside or outside, so we have our inside race. And then the inside of the thrust bearing is the part that is open. So you can see we have an open and we have a closed. So the gonna go like this. And then our outside race, which again does not say anything on it. Now there is a little bit of grease on them, so that is good. So now we have our parts lined out here. You can see the whole parts line up. So this is everything that goes in the head. So we have the head block, feathering shaft, and then we're going to have a spacer, a copper spacer. Then we're going to have our first bearing, then a second spacer, then a bearing. See if I can zoom in on this. Okay, that's probably better. So then so let's start off. We have a copper shim, bearing, copper spacer that goes in between the two bearings. We have a flat washer. We have the outside of the thrust bearing race, which is sticking to my driver. We have the thrust bearing. Then we have the inside or the outside. If you're going to say this is the inside, this is the outside. And then of course we have our screw, which is right here. So this is the way that it's going to lay out inside the new blade grips. So now we will go ahead and we're going to pull this apart. So now we have our head block. Again, we're going to keep everything in a line. So let me move you guys over. Okay. All right. Now we have our other head's going to come apart now. So again, we have a washer. And we have our thrust bearing. So let's just pop this all out and then I will line it up for you guys. Let's get this bearing out here. Okay, so now we got our other blade grip apart. So now we're going to line it up again. So it goes copper washer, bearing, copper spacer, and then we have our bearing and shim. It'll come apart here, sorry. And then our inside race for the thrust bearing. And then on the feathering shaft still, we have our thrust bearing itself, which again, open part of the bearing is the part that goes towards the head block inside. And then we have our outside race. So there we go. Now, this is not as neatly lined up as it was before, but you get the point. So now we're going to go ahead and pop out the head dampeners. These probably don't need to be replaced, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways. They are super cheap. So we're going to take our X-Acto knife And we are going to cut this bag open, just a little slit, because it comes with a bunch of head dampeners. So we will go ahead and pop us out a couple head dampeners. So we have 1 and 2. I'll keep these on the shelf for when I put another 200 flights on this helicopter. All right, so now we have our 2 brand new head dampeners. So we will go ahead and stick them in the head block. Okay, so now we have them in the head block. Brand new dampeners. Okay, so now we're gonna take our feathering shaft. And we are going to cut this guy open. We will get our shaft out here. We got a brand new feathering shaft. Throw the plastic away. So now what I'm going to do is take my feathering shaft tool, or not feathering shaft tool, I'm sorry, my ball link pliers tool. And you don't want to do this if you're trying to reuse the shaft, but I'm not reusing the shaft, so I don't care if you mark it up. So we're just going to grab the shaft. You could use a pair of needle nose. This one wasn't tight either. Wow. These must not have any Loctite on them. Something to check. I never even thought about checking that. I would definitely check on yours. So now we'll take the feathering shaft. We're going to toss it. Now we have our screws. Again, from the main shaft video, we want to throw our screws into the alcohol. Give them a few minutes. We want to make sure if there is any Loctite or oil on them that they come off. So now our 2 broken blade grips are garbage. So we can toss those. Let's take our screws out now because they are done. We will get a paper towel and dry these guys off. Just get them ready to be put in. So now you're going to take your screws after you have dried them off. Of course, we need Loctite. So we are going to take a screw and we are going to put a tiny bit of Loctite. You don't need much, just a little bit. We are going to take our feathering shaft and we're going to run 1 screw down. Hand tighten it is fine. So now we have 1 screw in the feathering shaft. Okay. So now we are going to reassemble our head. So now, of course, I have this laid backwards, so it's going to go from this side to this side. We are going to take our other dampeners that we don't need and put them aside. So now we're going to start from the right to the left. It can be confusing. This came out of the left side of the head block. This came out of the right side of the head block. So we're going to take our outside of the thrust bearing washer. And then again, now these still have oil in them. They look good. So I'm not going to re-oil them. I'm going to slide, of course, close side in, open side out. Then take the inside here. And we're going to slide this together. Actually, I do going to put a little bit of oil. Or a little bit of grease. So I'm going to take a little tiny bit of grease on a X-Acto knife. Just a little bit is all we need. This is probably even way too much. And I'm going to just go around the bearing here. Remember, you never want to get any grease down inside of your threads. So I'm just going to take a little bit of grease. That should be more than adequate. We're going to put it back together. I like to grease everything. So I'm going to slide these together. So next is this little shim. Slide our shim down. And then our bearing. And then our bearing is going to slide down like this. So now we have screw, thrust washer, thrust bearing, thrust washer, little flat washer, like a little spacer, and then one bearing. And then we are going to take this little copper guy here, and this is what spaces in between the blade grips. So, oh, we got to open our blade grips. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. We didn't even open blade grips up yet. So now we're going to open the blade grips. Use our knife with grease on it because we don't care. Set that aside. So now we have our brand new blade grips. Okay, now we have our brand new blade grips. So now we are going to take our full assembly that we just did, and we are going to slide this through and pull it through. So there we go. Now if you look inside, you should have your copper spacer in there. So now we're going to take our other bearing, and we are going to put the other bearing, pull it down, push it into place. And then our little copper washer, of course, we want to put it down to where it rides on the bearing. Push and pull everything into place. So now we have one side of the head completely assembled. So now I like to take a little bit of grease, which is actually, this is a lot of grease. We only need a little tiny bit. And I'm going to lube the feathering shaft. This, okay. So that way we are not inserting into the head dampeners dry. Sometimes you have to use a driver. And we are just going to push into the head dampeners. Give it a nice little twist and a rotate. Once you get to the greasy spot, you'll be able to definitely tell. Make sure your blade grips are going to go the right way when it's all said and done. Okay. Now everything on this side is pushed, nice and smooth. Now it's time to do the other side. So again, we are going to start with this guy. Little copper, it's a little beveled. You want the flat side to go towards the actual dampener, the bevel side to go towards the bearing. So we're going to push that down first. And then we are going to put this first bearing in. Then a little sleeve, which you can actually do it like this. So we could take our head, our blade grip, and can push this together. So now it's in. Then we could take this guy, slide it onto here, turn it upside down. So now that is in. Take our next bearing, do the same thing. Slide it on here, line it up, and drop the bearing down, and gently push it into place. So now we have our bearings in here. So now is the important part. So now we have to make sure that we have this shim. So you could do it a couple different ways. So this shim is very important. Don't forget that shim. So we could do it like this. We could take our inside race, and we can take our little tiny bit of grease here, and we will pack this bearing real quick. So packing the bearing, you just want to gently get it around the outside, and you don't want a lot. And then you pack around. So now that we got that part done, so we're going to take our bearing race here. We're going to assemble this. So first, remember that washer. Don't forget that washer. So this is going to slice. So remember when you're assembling that, this has to go in this way. So this actually becomes the last thing. So first thing, we take our outside race. Then we're going to take our thrust washer. Remember, closed side towards the bolt, open side towards the inside of the bearings of the grip, and then our outside race. Then we are going to take our little washer, little spacer washer. We're going to slide that down. And then we will push this together like so. You should have that, a little bit of shaft sticking out. Now we're going to carefully and gently slide all this down together. Now it looks like that. So now we're going to carefully set this down so nothing falls over. We're going to take our cleaned head bolt, feathering shaft bolt. We're going to put a tiny drop of Loctite. You want to make sure you do not get it to where it will splooge out and go into the thrust bearings, because that's how you get the bearings to get gritty. And then we want to carefully slide this into place. Sorry, you couldn't see that. And we want to thread this down till it stops. That means now we need our other driver. So now we are going to tighten both of these up. We should watch everything come together. Now we have a nice smooth head. Very, very smooth. No play. We want to make sure we got no slop. So this is put together very well. So we just want to check for tightness again. Okay, so now we're going to tighten down. Everything's still smooth. Tighten down. And everything is nice and smooth. All right. So now our head is back together, fully assembled. So now we're going to take our arms. These do not need Loctite. You never Loctite plastic to plastic. And then we will just, gonna have to probably put new threads in it because this is a brand new grip, which we do. So you just give it a little bit of pressure and start screwing. And go ahead and thread this in and tighten it down. There's one. And now remember, the hex side here is recessed for the nut for the bolt, so that goes to the bottom. So now we grab our other arm, and also A goes to the outside. It does matter because of the way that the ball link goes in. So A goes to the outside. We will go ahead and thread this one in now. So again, a little pressure, hold firmly as I just stick my arm in grease and tighten this down. We want to snug it up, but we want everything to be free. So everything should be free now. All your arms and your bolts, everything is nice and smooth. So now we have a completely reassembled, rebuilt rotor head. All that's left now is to put it back on the helicopter. But first, we are going to need to take our swash plate, and there is 3 tiny little Phillips screws. So I'm going to grab my number 1 Phillips, which this is actually a 0. So we have a 00 Phillips, and we are going to remove these 3 screws. Sorry if that was terribly out of focus. And there's 1 screw. We have 3 in total. And here's our 3rd. Okay, and then this somehow should pop apart. And it does. Oh, we're going to have to remove these 2 guys. I am learning with you. I've never taken this apart before. So we're going to want to remove these 2 ball ends. 1 and 2. So now these are off. So now this should push from the top to the bottom. Just like that. All right. Now this pushed apart. Perfect. grab our new swash plate in here. And I think I somehow knocked the screw off onto the floor, so I'm gonna have to find that, which is not gonna be very fun. But that's okay, I will find it. So we are going to now take our new swash plate here. And same thing, we are going to insert from the bottom up. Yep, bottom up. Push in nice and firm, and then we will take our screws and screw it back down. Now somehow I dropped one, so I'm only gonna have 2 screws right this second for the video purpose. Of course I will find the screw before I ever try to fly. But we'll put our other screw in here. And then we'll go ahead and put these back on. Remember, these are metal, so we need just a tiny, tiny bit of Loctite. Just a tiny bit. We'll go ahead and put these back in. Snug them down, not too tight. These are small parts. You will strip and pull threads. Another tiny bit of Loctite. And then put our links back in, and the swash plate is completely finished. So now we have to go to our old one, grab the ball link, spin it out, and then just go ahead and spin it in on this one. It does not matter which one goes where. Remember, this is plastic, so only till it stops is all we need. So now we're going to grab our other ball link, which is still in here, and we're going to spin this down. Again, this is plastic, only till it stops. And good. Now we have our swash plate back together. And of course, we still have to add this one, but we will do that when we put it back together on the helicopter. So there you guys go. We rebuilt the head and we rebuilt the swash plate.